Mark Sisson.
Hey.
Mark, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
We had a lovely dinner last night. I've known of your work for a great many years. Obviously, one of the, I would say, definitive leaders in the space. And as I've gone deeper into wanting to learn about nutrition, lifestyle, and as I shared with you earlier, my journey with my dad around cognitive health, I've gone deep on a lot of your information, and I'm so grateful that you would take a little time.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So I want to start with what I love is obviously you go super deep in your information around diet, nutrition, lifestyle, but this sort of tenet of live awesome to me is what really kind of stands out, because I feel like, at least in the minds of many, when you start thinking about nutrition or dieting and all this restriction, you have this sort of tenet of still being in the moment and being in a place of pleasure, and that really resonates with me. So can you sort of share for the audience a bit about what your tenets are for living an awesome way?
Sure. I think I'll give a little bit of a backstory, which is I came from endurance sports, where I was very focused on performance. I was a runner, marathon runner for a number of years, then was a triathlete. And throughout all that time, I was very good at what I did. I was very dedicated in the pursuit of it. And I did it for all in about 25 years. And when I finally retired, I looked back on the career and I thought, you know what, I never really had fun doing that. I was managing pain. I was managing discomfort. I was sometimes in the zone. I was, once in a while euphoric because I had just won a race. But for the most part, the training was just about discomfort management, and the racing was even more so. And that was a point at which I realized, if I'm going to move, if I'm going to be, living my life in ways that I espouse, that to achieve greater health, one of the metrics ought to be that I find as many ways to have fun as possible.
Love that.
I only do this life thing because, what is your purpose? Why are you here? Well, one of the reasons I'm here is to enjoy life and to have fun, and that means getting the greatest amount of enjoyment, fulfillment, contentment, whatever you want to call it, out of every possible moment. So when it comes to food, I have this template that I've crafted called the Primal Blueprint, and it's a dietary strategy. But within it are lots of opportunities to, go outside the margins and play around a little bit. And as long as you come back to the central theme, which is to, eat wholesome foods for the most part, and reduce sugar and sweetened beverages and artificial sweeteners and all the other stuff, then you can play around the margins with, food that we would call sensible indulgences. So a little bit of wine, a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of dairy, a little bit of, and with regard to eating, this concept became like, I want to live an awesome life. I want every bite of food I put in my mouth to taste great. I don't want to have to choke down something just because it's good for me. I want my movement patterns when I exercise to be fun. So I play ultimate frisbee with 20-somethings once a week, sometimes twice a week. It's one of the best workouts I do. I do stand-up paddling. And for me, in the old days of running, I'd go out for an hour-and-a-half run, and it was like, in my mind, it's always going to be, when is it going to be over? When is it going to be over? And when I'm paddling, it's more like, oh damn, it's going to be over soon. It's like I got to get back for a meeting. I snowboard. I do e-foil, surfing. I'm always looking for ways in which I can play and then incorporate that into my exercise pattern so that I get to call it exercise. And quite often throughout the week, my play becomes my best workouts. I mean, a really hard ultimate game takes me 2 days to recover from. And the whole time I'm doing it, 2 hours of sprinting up and down the fields and diving for catches. I don't do the actual layouts, but jumping and changing direction, all that stuff. It's really taxing, and it's putting me through a number of different. It's aerobic, it's anaerobic. It is causing my joints to be expressed in ways that they don't necessarily want to go. Yeah. But at the end of it, it's like, this is the best workout I could possibly do. And at no point during the game, again, am I thinking, oh crap, when is it going to be over? I can't take this anymore. In fact, I hate it when the young people go, yeah, what are we playing to? Can we stop soon? And I'm like, dude, I don't know about you, but I'm having so much fun. So that's what's behind this Live Awesome thing. It's trying to find the joy and the contentment and the pleasure and the fulfillment, and yes, there's a bit of hedonism in there, but every possible time you can, and not postponing it, or not suggesting that what I'm doing today is in preparation for a better life tomorrow. I want that good life right now.
I love that. You talked a bit about this, and I know you were sort of at the forefront of now what's become way more prolific in regards to sort of primal living, keto, the sort of paleo movement. I love the fact that you're bringing joy to it, because I think for so many people, and I know you talk about, they'll sort of push up the things up to their limits, and that notion of restriction is one of the biggest, barriers to behavior change. For me, it was my dad's illness, and then also frankly getting bit by a tick and worrying about Lyme disease and all, sort of going deep down, which right now actually I'm actually on antibiotics, which I like to avoid because I know of the consequence it can have on my gut. But what I've been researching is like, okay, how do you keep inflammation down? How do I have been having that joint pain, and I know you talk about I think you said from like basically 14 to 47 having IBS, as well as some arthritic symptoms. And I know that so many of the diseases and challenges we're facing these days are inflammation related.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of how you approach sort of diet and nutrition?
Sure. Well, I mean, I have a background in evolutionary biology. I was very interested in evolution when it was first really kind of coming to the forefront of conventional training in college. I mean, it was an esoteric sort of subset of science in the 60s and 50s and 60s, and then the 70s it started to be accepted as like a legitimate part of understanding science. We look at everything in biology through the lens of evolution. So I really got into evolutionary biology, and was always looking for clues in our past that would inform me as to how I might better perform as an athlete or achieve greater health. And what it comes down to is gene expression, and we know that now, and it's really only in the last 10 years that this has kind of become a sort of a recognized model for health. Every scientific paper that's done now looks at whatever variable was injected into the study, looks at the outcome at the level of gene expression. So how are your genes expressed? What genes are turning on? What genes are turning off as a result of whatever we put together in this experiment? So I looked at that, and so you combine the clues of evolutionary biology with the confirmation of modern genetic science, and you get some amazing aha moments. Like fat and cholesterol are not the proximate cause of heart disease. Inflammation and oxidation are. Yes, cholesterol plays a role, but it's actually a beneficial role. You just have to understand where it is in the context of this whole thing. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes. You're not doomed to get type 2 diabetes just because your parents had it. In many cases, developing type 2 diabetes is your perfect body's response to signals you've been giving it for 15 or 20 years by overfeeding it sugar, by under-exercising or not exercising at all, by taking in inflammatory industrial seed oils like canola, corn oil, soybean oil, which add not just inflammation, but insulin resistance to the cells. And all of these things can be reversed by shifting the behavior around, whether it's changing the diet or altering the form of exercise, the amount of sun exposure you get, very important, the amount of sleep you get, the amount of play you engage in, how you use your brain. All these things become the totality of a life way that I call the primal blueprint. So I go back, and again, I looked at what are the 10 basic primal laws that humans lived by for 2.5 million years that literally forged the genes that we have today, and which our genes expect us to engage in if we want to be strong, lean, fit, happy, healthy, productive. That's been the fun part of this journey of mine that's now gone on more than 30 years, is discovering these hidden genetic switches that we all have, and then informing the public. And I think that's probably if I had a superpower, it's being able to take that complex scientific information and distilling it into ways in which people can understand it and maybe choose to incorporate it in their lives.
Yeah, you're of the best I've seen at being that bridge, if you will, or translator, because I think so much of the information becomes overwhelming, and we exist in a bit of a bubble, but I go back home. All I have to do is fly into these various airports, and you can kind of take a thermostat on health. And whenever I go back home to the Midwest, where they literally just expanded the size of the seat buses, the buses on the seats, because of the obesity epidemic, and now having more obese people on the planet than non-obese people, which is
crazy.
Which is crazy. It's so. I'm always thinking about how does my uncle, who lives in like suburban Chicago, or like a mom with 3 kids in Wichita, Kansas, take in some of this information. And I love how you break it down in terms of sleep and play. What is by the way, I feel like in listening to a lot of your content, you sort of advocate, it occurred to me, and this is just because I lived in Sri Lanka for 2 years, it's almost like this probably, these are not your words, these are mine, but like a middle path, right? Like, which is to say, I feel like you're not the hardcore restrictive guy. Like, you've got all the information, but you're not telling people not to have fun. In fact, you're telling people to have fun.
Yeah.
You're not telling people, oh, you can never touch the chocolate. It's just more about like knowing your limits, as I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, how do you approach this notion of limit and if you will, moderated indulgence?
Yeah. So I feel like human nature is to see what we can get away with. So
right.
we push up against the edges all the time, and some people can get away with a lot more than others. And by the way, people try to get away with things like, how little work can I do and still get paid, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Or how much can I flirt, around and still keep my marriage, or how much can I, all of these different ways in which we play with the margins. And one of those that's very, very common is how much food can I eat,
right,
and not gain weight, or what's the most amount of cheesecake I can have, and not feel guilty about having it. And so we try to see what we can get away with. And that's just human nature, and that's fine. And as long as we recognize that, we can start to impose certain boundaries or template for our own activity. So some people who don't gain weight, and they can eat pasta, and they can eat bread, and they can eat cereal, and they can eat lots of sugar and don't gain weight. Well, they can get away with that. The question becomes, are there other things? Are there more insidious things happening inside them that don't manifest themselves just in weight gain, but maybe causing issues? So we look at setting. I have an 80-20 rule. So I just say, look, here's what I do. I strive for 100%. If at the end of the day I come in at 80%, then I'm ahead of the game. So I wrote a book called The Keto Reset Diet, and it was a New York Times bestseller, and a lot of people are going keto. People ask me all the time, how do you do it? Are you keto all the time? That must be crazy. That must be difficult. I'm like, I'm not even keto all the time.
Yeah.
I use the ketogenic diet as a means, as a tool of resetting my metabolism once in a while. I'm establishing metabolic flexibility. That metabolic flexibility allows me the leeway to get away with having 3 or 4 bites of cheesecake once in a while and not feeling guilty or bad or like I failed myself or any of that. So it's up to everyone to sort of kind of determine where they fall on this spectrum. Some people are like rigidly like, if I don't adhere 100% to my plan, then I'm gonna, something bad's gonna happen. I'm gonna fall off the wagon. I'm gonna whatever. And other people are like, I'm just gonna do the best I can with what I have at this time, and because life's too short to then get sick from the stress of worrying about how I failed in my my intention, in my New Year's resolution or whatever. So it's that becomes an interesting part for me to, once I've sort of decided or discerned for myself what all of the biochemical possibilities are and all the lifestyle choices, then it's okay, how much do I really want to incorporate that? What is the value of me embracing that behavior versus the pleasure I might derive from not doing it and doing something else? I mean, that's really the interesting thing about life, is kind of deciding, how do I enjoy my life today and yet not sacrifice my longevity or my health into the future.
Yeah, I think that really hits a note for me, because I've been listening to a ton of people in the space that are talking about longevity. It's obviously kind of a buzzword at the moment. But it occurs to me that as someone who's been in the field and been leader in the field longer than most, and if I may say so, an exemplification of how I like to age, and just absolutely like a paragon of health. I mean, you're healthier than I am, I'm sure, at this particular point in time. But how do you view and I love this notion that these sort of two separate but related parts. You talk about metabolic health and metabolic flexibility, and one of the things that I've been delving deep into is how can I just did a mitochondrial test. I'm really kind of looking at like how are my cells kind of healthy, and am actually exploring. So I've never, full transparency, and probably many in the audience haven't. Some will have been ketogenic, but especially now, having just got bit by a tick, not waiting to see if I got Lyme or not, just basically like, okay, bang, I'm going to do the antibiotics because I don't even want to mess with it. I know how gnarly that is. But basically, on the holistic side, a lot of it's about reducing inflammation, and I'm about to jump into sort of this ketogenic diet. But I'm also into and I don't know if this is scientifically based. The idea of flexibility seems to occur to make sense to me, and the idea of like, I feel like there's a strength in diversity of ways of being. So this is not based on science. Science is based on my inclination, but it seems to me that actually being intermittent in your fasting, or that's maybe an analogy, but being intermittent in your ketogenic lifestyle, not being in ketosis all the time, in some ways would probably be better for your adaptation. Is that, and that's based on just a thought, but is it good to sort of diversify so your body doesn't become used to sort of the monoculture of a certain way of being, in your experience, for longevity?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a philosophical question as much as anything else, because there are people I know have been keto for 10 years and love it, and it's very sustainable for them. I'm a person who I just like certain kinds of food, and I'm not willing to completely ignore them forever, or even certain quantities of them in the short term. So I live in what I call the keto zone. So I use keto, as I say, to reset my metabolism to achieve metabolic flexibility. Metabolic flexibility basically describes the body's ability to extract energy from whatever substrate is available. You become efficient and flexible so that whatever you're doing, you're not reliant on just sugar, for instance. Sugar is kind of, we talk about the carbohydrate paradigm, which most of us have lived in most of our lives because there's access to such carbohydrate in this country. So we eat carbs, we burn glucose, the brain uses glucose, we store the extra as fat, we wonder why we can't burn off the fat, but the reason is because we're eating so much glucose, we raise insulin, insulin locks fat into the fat cells, and that's become this typical paradigm that does lead to a lot of metabolic issues, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome. We can talk about Alzheimer's, we can talk about arthritis, we can talk about a number of inflammatory diseases, we can talk, pretty much most of these diseases of civilization that are 90% of the reason people are ill are a result of, I think, poor dietary choices. Now, if you establish metabolic flexibility, now you can get energy from the fat on your plate of food, the fat on your hips or your thighs or your belly, the carbohydrate on your plate of food, the glucose in your bloodstream, the glycogen in your muscles, the ketones that your liver makes. It's this amazingly wide array of substrates that you can access because you've built the metabolic machinery, not only to burn it, but to take it out of storage and access it. So you can readily access fat from your fat cells and use that as fuel to get you through not just the next meal, but through days of not eating, if that presented itself, either by choice, which a lot of people do, or just because there's no food around. This sort of flexibility has a number of positive consequences, one of which is you start to burn off your stored body fat. Now you trend toward your ideal body composition, which makes you a little bit lighter, a little bit more, strength to weight ratio improves. This access to fat all the time for your muscles means you have more energy. You feel like moving more, and you feel less like sitting around like a couch potato. Because your brain now becomes adept at using ketones, and your brain actually prefers ketones over glucose. Now you have access to this fuel in your brain that you can access all day long and not have to consume carbohydrates because you have low blood sugar. You have that 2 o'clock post-lunch, nap time kind of feeling.
Right.
All these things become available, and probably the most important one is your hunger, appetite, and cravings go away as a result of your having refined your metabolic flexibility. So now your life is not dictated by the next meal. Like, Michael, I'd love to do this podcast with you, but the time, it's going to go through lunch. I can't not eat lunch. Right? Or, I overslept and missed breakfast. I have to have breakfast, and then lunch is going to be in 2 hours. I have to have lunch. All these things that people sort of assume they have to do, they have to have 3 meals a day. Now, to your point, I guess I'm kind of taking a broad.
No, I love the overview. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So to your point, the human experience is one of fractal eating. It's one of never having access to a lot of food, and so we're wired to overconsume whatever food we come to. That's part of the hardwiring of our brain. That's why we tend to overeat. We overeat because we've got this mechanism that says, all right, eat as much as you can put in your pie hole and fill your belly, and then what we'll do is we'll convert the extra energy into fuel that you carry around with you on your hips and your ass and your thighs, just above the center of gravity. It's like the original fanny pack, full of fuel. It's such a cool, elegant solution to a lack of food in the world. So that's how we evolved. We evolved with this amazing system designed to convert excess energy into fuel that we carry around with us. And now we're born with this amazing ability to take that fuel out of storage and combust it whenever we need without any adverse effect, like without feeling hangry or without being, obnoxious or just giving up and wanting to take a nap. I mean, imagine our ancestors, going 3 days without eating and going, oh, you know what, I give up, I'm going to die. No, we have this system that's, plenty of fat on just about everybody to live for days and days and days without eating, and then plenty of ketones manufactured from some of that fat to give the brain the focus and concentration to go track down the next beast or go gather the next roots, shoots, and berries and nuts and things like that. So that's how we're designed, and as a result, we're designed to eat fractally, like big meals sometimes, small meals other times, twice a day sometimes, once a day sometimes, not at all some days, maybe 3 times other days, and that's truly the human experience, and that's also the greatest manifestation of metabolic flexibility. Because if we can do all that, and through it all say, I have all my energy I need, I have all the strength and power I need, I don't get sick, I don't get hungry, and I don't feel different from one day to the next. One of the things I hear about some of the issues that people would comment about in some of these keto Facebook sites is, well, I'm keto, I've been keto for 2 months, and if I have 75 grams of carbs one day, I get kicked out of keto, and I feel like crap for 5 days. Dude, that's not metabolic flexibility. You're still broken metabolically, so now we have to talk about what do you do to fix that.
Right.
Part of it's diet, part of it's your exercise routine. We want to get you in the gym doing high intensity stuff once in a while, not every day, but once in a while. We want to get you out walking long distances so you just burn fat when you're doing that. We want you to do what we call archetypal rest postures, where you're not just sitting in a chair, but you're kneeling on the ground, either side sitting or side kneeling or high kneeling or low kneeling or cross-legged or whatever, in positions that actually stretch your fascia and your connective tissue, because they're actually integrally involved in your glucose regulation. This is I just co-authored a paper with a guy, Matt Walden, a friend of mine, 2 papers actually, on these archetypal rest postures and their importance now in not just maintaining flexibility and range of motion, but in glucose tolerance.
Fascinating. Yeah, I'm really intrigued by that diversification, especially as you mentioned, sort of, for lack of a better term, exercise and postures, right? Like, I know that my understanding is you have a stand-up desk, treadmill for yourself, your staff, etc., which I've started to look into because I realize now as I'm writing a book, it's like, man, I'm sitting way more than I'm comfortable sitting. And I'll go off and do yoga and all these things. I actually started doing more yoga because I was doing HIIT training, and I tore a muscle in my shoulder. But what I've realized is that I don't feel as fit as I was feeling. And again, to this point of sort of diversity, I love that you have sort of a protocol around diversification of exercise. Is there I believe also you have a 21-day sort of program to prepare people for ketosis as well.
Yeah.
Because it's something it seems like a lot of people will just jump into again, and then like they feel like they're failing, right? Or they're like, I had the 75 grams of carbs. So can you talk about like how do you prepare is there, if you will, a mindset to approaching this lifestyle change to prepare you for optimal success, as opposed to just saying, right, I'm cutting everything out, and then like a New Year's resolution, 5 days later you're done.
We have to cut some stuff out. But,
what do you have to cut out?
Yeah, so what we did in the Keto Reset diet book was we said, look, there's a lot of people are going to go keto, and a lot of people are going to have a tough time with it. It's going to be miserable for them because they go, that old Atkins, total indoctrination where you drop to 20 grams a day of carbs, and that's just too much for a lot of people. And it becomes, some people power through it. Everyone's going to survive it, but some people are just going to give up and just say it's just too uncomfortable. So what we decided was we would stair-step you into getting ready to go keto, so it's a kinder, gentler version. So the 21-day total body transformation, or 21-day part of the Keto Reset, was to first eliminate the things we know you need to get rid of. The pies, the cakes, the candies, the pastas, the breads, the cereals, all the things that are processed carbohydrates that you don't need, that aren't real food. Get rid of the industrial seed oils, the corn oil, the soybean oil, the canola oil, things like that. And in their place, avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, healthy fats from fish, from animal products, certainly clean sources of protein, and then in vegetables, some fruit. And if you're able to get to that point where you're eliminating all this truly nasty, offending ingredients, and just have a broad array of real food, which even includes at this point some potatoes, some sweet potatoes, some legumes, or something like that. And in 3 weeks, you'll start to feel better. You'll start to the inflammation that you may have been experiencing will go away. Certainly by getting rid of grains, a lot of people will have digestive issues that will clear up. And after 3 weeks, now, and also we have there's some other lifestyle things you have to throw. You have to get your sleep dialed in. You can't just like get your diet fixed and then stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning, raging, and then get up in the morning for work to an alarm clock. There's a few other components to this. But if you do all this, then at the end of 3, sometimes 4 weeks, we actually in the book we have a midterm exam, and you pass the exam. Can I wake up in the morning and go till 10 or 11 o'clock without needing to eat? Can I do a workout fast and then not have to eat after the end of a workout? These are all indications that you're beginning to get better at burning fat, that you're actually deriving energy from fat. You don't need another carbohydrate meal to get you through the day or to the next meal. So that's kind of slower, easier, gentler indoctrination to the point at which then now I'm at the point where, okay, I just have to identify 60 other grams of carbs. Maybe it's in the sweet potato or the potatoes or the lentils or whatever those I was consuming, or maybe it was in some fruit, that now I cut out, so I'm below 50 grams of carbs a day. Now I'm going keto, and it's not just a pleasant, pleasurable experience. It's, you notice the energy boost, and you notice further weight loss, and your mood improves, and it's transformational for a lot of people.
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
I now feel like I actually feel set up for it, because I've done other things. I've done fasts. I practice intermittent fasting pretty regularly, and I've definitely downed a great number of my carbohydrates. My dad actually, what I found out in this sort of journey to dementia was he obviously, as we know, which is a whole other subject, but was given this sort of a lot of the information is totally antithetical to health in terms of like the traditional food pyramid, and he drank Diet Coke with the aspartame and all of that crap, and Tums and he grew up in the Midwest. That's what he was told to do. So, but obviously I've realized that those things are definitely antithetical to health. So, in the context of having a roadmap to help prepare me from jumping in, I love that you've sort of spelled that out. What do you see as myths that are still prevailing? Like you mentioned, for example, can you do a workout without everyone's like, oh, well, you gotta, I go to the gym, everyone's got their protein smoothie or their this and that.
Their pre-workout drink and their post-workout
Exactly. What are the myths that you've seen? You've been in the game. You're one of the foremost authorities that people still buy into. That I don't want to say drive you crazy, but like that you can share that are definitively myths that aren't necessarily true.
Well, probably the number one myth is that exercise is a good way to lose weight. It's a horrible way to lose weight. You have to exercise, but you do it more for metabolic flexibility. You do it more for range of motion and mobility and longevity, and to look good naked for sure. But that's not a good way to lose weight. In fact, people who try to use exercise as a weight loss tool almost invariably fail. The best example would be all the people lined up for the LA Marathon who weigh 25 or 40 pounds overweight, and they've been training for a year for the marathon, and they're running 40 miles a week. How come they're not? That's clearly not working for them. Another I think basic myth is that we need carbohydrate to live, and we certainly need carbohydrate to perform well in the gym. And therein lies the problem with the mantra that the fitness community had for decades, which is 6 meals a day. 6 small meals. Don't go more than 2.5 or 3 hours without eating, or you'll cannibalize your muscle tissue. That's patently wrong and has been very detrimental to a lot of people. Now, some people were able to perform well on that, but you're sort of keeping up with the exercise routine and you're diligent about it, and you're sacrifice. That was also the days of white rice and chicken breast with no skin, and multiple meals throughout the day, because you wanted to have a little bit of protein at every meal, a little bit of carbohydrate at every meal. And again, the assumption was that if you didn't do that and you were working out hard, that your blood glucose would run low, and then your brain would scream and send a signal to the adrenals to create cortisol, which would strip down the muscle tissues that you just built, send it to the liver to become glucose. Some of these amino acids can be converted into glucose, and then make the brain happy. But it was and by the way, that is how that worked, which is why all those things, all those mantras, were probably the only way to do it back when we didn't understand how great we are at burning fat, how easy it is to become a fat-burning beast, how wonderful ketones are as an alternative fuel to carbohydrate. So with this new technology, it's so much easier to achieve ideal body composition, to achieve a stronger, leaner body, so you can actually put muscle on. You don't have to carbo load to do long distance. You don't have to carbo load to do glycolytic workouts. You just don't do them every day. And that was the other part of the old paradigm was, if I want to be good at something, I have to really go hard every day. And I think CrossFit's a good example of people who sometimes get into it all in, and now they hurt their shoulder, or they're doing something way too much, and they're not recovering, and they feel worse off than when they started.
Yeah.
And it's not.
That happened to me.
It's not about the workout. It's just about how you have the sequence of them, and how you do them so frequently that you don't give yourself time to recover. Exercise, and especially intense exercise, only works if you give the body time to recover and repair.
Yeah.
Because the actual definition of hard, intense exercise, you're tearing stuff down. You've got micro tears going on in the muscle, and you gotta give the time to recover, and the raw materials, by the way, and the nutrients to recover. And I don't know about you, but that's why I exercise. I don't exercise just to go in there and struggle and suffer every day so I can say I did that.
Right.
I'm looking to improve. I'm looking to at my age, I can't do any more PRs, but to maintain, my range of motion, my strength, my power, all the things that. And for me, I'm mostly in the gym to just prevent injuries from when I'm playing.
You talked about collagen last night. We were talking about some of the bigger injuries in the NBA that have occurred recently, and I've also, in doing my research, talk a little bit about collagen, because it's I was talking to my friend Kyle Kingsbury, and he was talking about with his wife. Actually, she was doing bone broth every day, and actually this was an aesthetic thing, but he's like, no stretch marks. I know you talk about Frisbee and like your Achilles, and like how it would throw you off if you noticed you weren't taking collagen. You could talk a little bit about collagen, and also like I know you get asked a fair amount about the gut, but one of the things I have, so I've just done a whole barrage of testing, so cognitive, heart health, everything. And one of the things I did realize is I do indeed have a gluten sensitivity on the spectrum, not celiac, but also some leaky gut. So I'd love to hear your thoughts around. As I understand it, many people have some aspect of leaky gut, which can also turn into leaky brain, and that's where my concern is, given what I've witnessed. How can one both heal the gut and also kind of keep in that optimal performance for sports? So there's a couple questions there, but basically,
Yeah, but they're related.
Yes,
So
exactly.
you asked about collagen. I think collagen is the fourth macronutrient. I think you got, fat, protein, carbohydrate are the three basic macronutrients that we talk about. Ketones actually maybe the fourth one, so the fifth one would be collagen. But collagen is unique enough in its amino acid peptide sequence that you don't see a lot of it in the regular diet. Now, for 2.5 million years, up until the 1900s, we ate nose to tail. We ate all the animal, and so we got the collagen forming parts of the animal. We got those peptides from either the knuckles chewing on the skin, the feet, boiling down the nether parts of the beast and making a broth, collecting all this nice collagenous, gelatinous material, and then consuming it. And even into the 1900s and early 1930s and 40s, then we started eating the choicer cuts of meat, right? And so you go to the butcher shop and you wouldn't get the whole animal anymore. You'd get T-bone, or you'd get a ribeye, or you'd get New York strip, or porterhouse, or whatever cut it was, and it was devoid of any of these other gelatinous collagen type providing amino acids. Now, it was great for building muscle because you eat muscle meat to build muscle, but we didn't get any of the collagen raw materials from that. However, we did have Jell-O and Knox gelatin, and so even after the 30s and 40s, we had this period of time up until probably the 90s when at least we were getting some amount of collagen peptides in our diet, even if it was a candy flavored dessert, in the form of Jell-O, or if it was Knox gelatin or whatever. Then when the whole sugar thing and the people stopped eating products like that in the 90s, we see this window of the mid 90s to now where or maybe 5 years ago when we started introducing bone broth, where there was no access to collagen raw materials in the body. And I saw that in myself, and I saw it in athletes where tendons and ligaments they're all made of these collagen peptides. Glycine's huge. Proline, hydroxyproline. There's some amino acids that you find in prevalence in the hides of animals, and again in the cartilage and the tendons, that you don't find in the choice cuts of meat. But those are all in human ligaments, tendons, fascia, connective tissue, cartilage, skin, hair, nails. In fact, collagen as a protein is more prevalent than muscle protein in most people in the human body, yes. The lining of the gut has a lot of collagen in it. So when you remove this raw material from the diet, the body goes, hey, well, what am I going to do? Well, I know, in my case, my body just said, you're stressing your Achilles sprinting, and you're too old for that shit. You should not be sprinting. You're in your 50s, right? And you're not giving the raw material, so we'll just create some scar tissue. So we just build up the Achilles, and so I had Achilles tendinosis, a thickening of the Achilles. It's the body's, response to the inputs, or the lack of inputs in the case of not having any collagen, to say, okay, we don't have the collagen, so plan B, thicken those Achilles, we'll weaken them, but there'll be a little scar tissue there, they'll be more brittle, they won't be as pliable, so don't jump off a 2-foot landing, or don't do a box jump because you'll snap your tendons. And that was my case, and I see that a lot with athletes now. Recently in basketball, you saw 2 major issues in one series. You saw, KD goes down with his Achilles because his calf had been compromised, and I suspect, if he'd been doing enough collagen replacement and stuff like that, and they'd paid attention to the calf, that didn't have to happen. Both those injuries in the one with Klay Thompson, same thing. Hamstring issue. The hamstring is a major controller of what's going on in the knee. If you take the hamstring out of that equation and put all the force on the MCL or the ACL or any of those knee ligaments, problems are bound to happen. So, I feel like this collagen has been the missing ingredient in a lot of people's lives for lots of reasons for the past several decades, with the advent of and the re-emergence of bone broth, starting about 5 years ago, there was now an opportunity to at least find a way to consume collagen. And then because I basically repaired my damaged Achilles with collagen supplementation, I'm very certain of that. I started making it. I said, well, I gotta create a product that's got a good delivery system so that it tastes great. You want to drink it. Compliance is a big issue with some of these supplements. And so we made Primal Kitchen Collagen Fuel. We have a vanilla that you can use as a coffee creamer, and a chocolate you can put in coffee. You can mix it with water or put it in coffee. Then we have a turmeric version of it, a golden turmeric that tastes great with hot water, almost like a chai tea. And I just feel like we haven't even begun to see the resurgence of collagen in the diet because it's that critical.
And as it relates, and by the way, we didn't even talk about this before, but I've got about 10 bottles of Primal Kitchen, and it's been a real asset to my life, and I'm super grateful because like last night we're out at dinner. Instead of having ketchup, I did have a few fries, but I was like, I'm going to put at least give me sugar-free ketchup. I mean, it's been, and all my salad dressings. I actually, so collagen was one of the biggest insights for me this year. The other, which you spoke of earlier, frankly, but the industrial seed oils, and just I didn't quite realize how prolific they were. Like now, as I look on almost any packaged good, processed food, it's like, I'm getting ready for this cleanse, and I was like, man, everything has these industrial seed oils in them. I mean, it's like, and the inflammatory response. I feel like, and going out to eat, it's a big problem, right? Because
it's a huge problem. So you can go to the best restaurant in town and have the nicest bowl of organic greens, and then find out that they use a combination of soybean oil, and corn oil with a tiny bit of extra virgin olive oil to make their dressing. Yeah. And literally ruins the entire health effect of this salad that you bought ostensibly because you want to be healthy.
Right. Yeah, and that's been my experience. Our friend Max Lugavere talks about that a fair amount. Like he'll go to Sweet Greens, but he will have no salad dressing, so he's literally bringing dressings with him.
I'm that guy too. I mean, I that's why I made my dressings. Like, I was going to create a bandolier, stick the batter in there, with a serape and a low, the Clint Eastwood kind of thing. Walk into a place with a stogie hanging above mouth and order a salad.
I think you should do that. Yeah. I've seen that. I saw a guy who this is very Burning Man, but I saw a guy with like crystals in a bandolier. But I was like, I'd go in with dressings. That'd be pretty epic. Yeah. But to the point of the gut. Aside from collagen, is there anything else that you would recommend? Because I know a lot of people. You yourself had this IBS issue. You said for a long time, and I know it affected your life in a profound way. I've encountered more and more people with gut health issues. I don't have any acute symptoms, but I know that we don't have to go deep into the microbiome. I know you've talked about that plenty, but I know obviously it's an area where it's sort of like front line for a lot of our immunity, inflammatory markers, all these different things. Is there a particular protocol that you would recommend for rebuilding your gut?
So interestingly, I've talked a lot about that period from when I was 14 to when I was 47, when I had IBS that ran my life, and when I got rid of grains, gluten for the most part, but almost all grains, because some were some forms of this tightly folded protein that exists, zyme and corn and others are gluten analogs in other grains. You get rid of the whole thing for a while, and it changed my life, and it was I thought I was going to have to live with this for the rest of my life, and the next thing you know, within a month, completely cleared up. Well, it didn't completely clear up. It cleared up like 95%. And so what I'm going to say is that collagen was the last 5%. So I literally, even though I'd had a leaky gut and I'd had these issues my whole life, and the symptoms went away when I removed the offending ingredient, it wasn't until I introduced a rebuilding ingredient, a repair ingredient in the form of collagen, because so much of the gut is collagen, that last 5% fell into place. So that for me was a critical part of my gut health experience, was the re-addition or the addition back in of collagen. In terms of gut microbiome, we are just scratching the surface on that. It's almost to the point where a lot of people have maybe too much of what they think is information and are making decisions that maybe ought to wait a year or two before they start acting on. And by that I mean, there's a lot of the concept of a fecal transplant like a shit milkshake, is bizarre. It makes sense in some context, but there's 3,000 strains of bacteria that reside in you, and different, they have different amounts, and even at different times of day and different times of year and different, when you're sick or not sick, and to think that you can somehow pull those levers and get it just right by doing a test and then getting some results back and making an adjustment by taking probiotics or something else. I think it's early days for that. It's way early days for that. Yeah. But I think the recognition that there are 60 to 100 trillion individual organisms living in us that are not us is a pretty wild recognition, out of the gates. I mean, if you can take the anthropomorphic override out of it, you could say that bacteria develop humans as a life support system.
It's fascinating. I'm just going to mention this briefly because it's tangential, but the last we saw each other was actually at Paleo FX. And one of the most fascinating, I generally go more to connect with the people than the content because I've seen much of the content, but I did wind up popping into Zach Bush's talk on the soil and the microbiome, and he talks about sort of primal soil, if you will, right? Yeah. And obviously there is a profound connection between the inner world and the outer world. It's something I talk about, but in the context of the gut, the fact that we're depleting our soils from all these, like, this diverse biological material, bacteria, etc., is profoundly consequential, obviously. And then now we're seeing with glyphosate and all these different things that are wreaking havoc, not just in terms of gluten sensitivity, but you may have a gluten sensitivity, you definitely have a glyphosate sensitivity.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I'm fascinated by it, and it still blows my mind, and I'm like everyone else, just trying to figure it out. In the interest of time, because I know that you have a variety of things to do, we'll save that for another time. But what are some of the kind of, if you will, like if I were an everyday sort of person who was just trying to get a handle on their health? I mean, you've talked about sleep, you've talked about play, obviously nutrition. Is there one or two things that you recommend for the average person that is, if you will, the minimum effective dose? Because I know you talk about that in the context of exercise, and that 80-20 principle. That is the one or two things that the person could start with that would have the most consequential impact on their health.
Well, some people who are starting starting at zero, I'd say find every possible way to eliminate sugar from your diet. Mm-hmm. So if that became your sole goal, was to just say, I don't even care how much food I eat, I can eat as much of anything else that I want, but I'm going to not eat sugar of any kind, for 30 days or 40 days. And then I think, because that's kind of a major first step, and a lot of us in this field, Ron Rosedale, Michael Eads, wrote Protein Power 30 years ago, sold 4 million copies. It was basically one of the first, keto books after Atkins. We would all say that the less sugar you eat in a lifetime, the longer you'll live, the healthier you'll be. So sugar is really, it's as bad as people are making it out to be, and possibly worse. Except the industrial seed oil thing is really insidious as well. So if you could cut out if you could find ways in which you do not consume soybean, corn oil, or canola, those would be two of the dietary things. And then the other, like, I'm gonna have to give you 4.
Give me 4.
So those are the two dietary. Then sleep is always overlooked. And if you're a person who brags about getting by on 5 hours of sleep, God bless you, but it's going to bite you in the ass one day. So I like to brag about how much sleep I got.
Yeah.
And so if, like,
I'm with you.
8.5 is a good number. 9's even better for me. And I make no bones about it. I view it as restorative. I get a lot of good thinking done and dreaming done in the wakey things in between. And then walk. If people just got out and walked, life as a longevity, really, you can be certainly testify to this. Longevity really requires 2 basic essential elements: access to cognition and mobility. So, if you're sitting in a wheelchair and you don't have access to your cognition, your quality of life is essentially non-existent. And you could be 85 or 90 years old and have outlived all your friends, but if you're not mobile, if you can't get places and do things and visit people and have access to memories, then life isn't you just can't talk about, well, I've heard the story so much. He's robust, but he has dementia. Well, that's not a good quality of life. So whatever we can do to hold on to those two things, mobility and access to cognition, are the major drivers of quality of life as we get older. And to that effect, reducing inflammation by watching what you eat, and increasing mobility by walking, and getting enough rest and recovery in between. Those are the easy ones, and yet they're the ones that in toto probably generate 80% of the benefits you're going to get.
Mm-hmm. I like that you talk about that 80%, because I noticed in doing some research, you talked about, obviously you were a world-class competitor, which we haven't even talked about, but you were top of the field, and yet at some point, which I'm also fascinated by. You're obviously world-class performer athlete, but you're also a world-class entrepreneur. I imagine some of the qualities that have been part of your routine and mindset have translated, and I'd love to sort of touch on that. But to finish off my point, it seems to me that you came to a point where you're like, I don't need to necessarily win the race anymore for my quality of life. I don't know what that mindset shift was. I'll still be in the top 80, but because you were saying, actually I was reading yesterday, and this is a bit tangential but related, it was an article about Oprah deciding not to have kids. Mm-hmm. And as amazing as Oprah is, she basically said, I would have not been the best mother because something would have had to give, and it would have likely been my attention to my children based on what she felt her mission in life was. It occurs to me as somewhat analogous because at some point, it's like if you're singularly focused on one thing, maybe you derive joy from that. I don't want to make a judgment one way or the other, but you can still be a world-class performer and athlete. But if you want to have other elements of your life in balance, if you will, balance is maybe the wrong word, but flourishing, something's got to give. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because you I think it's another element, frankly, of, if you will, the whyness, and to me you exemplify someone I look up to in regards to you've made appropriate transitions, right? You're still an incredible athlete, I'm sure, but you're also focusing your attention elsewhere, right? And you've now built and now just sold this company, but you're still heart and soul into it. Can you talk a little bit about that, sort of the 80-20 principle as it relates to quality of life?
No, that's really, no one's ever posed the question that way, and I hadn't given it a lot of thought, but I will now, and that is, I was always an athlete in the endurance field. You are judged by the time you run and the place you finish. Mm-hmm. So, you can be on a team of athletes and not have a very good game. Your team could still win. You could have the best game ever and your team still loses. But when you're in individual sports, it's all you. You're out there. You're the one who's determining the outcome. And there was a point at which that focus and dedication got me up every single day, and I can't tap into that source anymore. When it went away forever. I've lost my mojo, as Austin Powers would say, for that. But that was a good thing, because what it did was it took me away from this notion that I had to be the best at everything that I did. And when you're an endurance athlete and you're an elite athlete, you want to win the race. You don't want to finish top 10% or whatever. You want to win the damn race. When I let go of that, partly because I had to, I was injured and I couldn't train at that level anymore, I started to look at ways in which I could leverage my life. I'd done it in college. I was pre-med in college, and there was a point at which I said, I just did a cost-benefit analysis, and I said, okay, I could study 8 hours a night and get all A's, or I could study an hour and a half a night and get B pluses. And so that won't get me into med school, but that'll get me the education I want, and it'll give me a life. And I won't be pissed off about the time I spent studying in school. And so there's a bit of a laziness to that, but I like to look at more in terms of leverage. I was leveraging my resources so that I could live my life in total, not because I had friends who were pre-med, and that's all they did. That's all they studied. They were miserable. They hated it. By the way, a lot of them became doctors and hate that now. So I'm like, thank my lucky stars that I chose what I chose. In business, much the same thing happens. I started writing Mark's Daily Apple, and I wrote every article for a few years, and then it just got too much.
And so that's a daily blog.
Thing. So then I hired researchers, and I had people doing research for me. Then I had writers, and I had people writing some of the articles for me. And that was my ability to leverage my thought leadership in a way that generated the greatest good for all. In business, I was always of the mindset that I'm the smartest guy in the room. And that cost me in business for a long time. It didn't cost me. I was always successful, but I worked my freaking ass off. Yeah. And it was so weirdly, prophetically perfect when I let go of that, and I started hiring people in areas that I knew they knew more than I did, and let them just run with it, that my businesses started to really take off and become successful. And again, it was letting go of that attachment to being right or being the smartest guy in the room, and just coming back and going, what do I do? What's my real job? My job is to leverage talent. I basically manage talent and assets, money, right? And and I'm good at that, and it doesn't require me doing an all-nighter to do it. All it requires is my taking a lifetime worth of life experience and managing people in a way that I know I'm good at. So I sort of found my sweet spot there, and it turned out it was a lot less difficult, and it was more fun than I ever had in any of the other businesses where I was doing well, but grinding it out, and burning the candle at both ends and all this other crap.
I can't tell you how much that resonates with me. Was there an epiphany, if you will, and maybe there wasn't, so I don't want to force the issue, but where because I definitely built and managed teams. I've also kind of like contracted and expanded in terms of like the size of those teams, if you will. And sort of, I came to the personal realization that I likely wouldn't want to start another company that is 100 employee, plus company, because the parts of that I feel I'm most successful at and leverage I can have isn't necessarily in that realm.
Yeah.
I still think you can have global impact and create incredible companies and have call it a medium-sized team where you still sort of know everyone's name, their kids' names, what have you, and still and focus on what you do best. But I think there is, for many entrepreneurs, this sort of tendency, like you said, right, of like of a real resistance to surrendering control. Mm-hmm. What was the catalyst that enabled you to say, right, I've been successful, and now having created this last company, which is, I imagine, has been exponentially successful. What was the shift in mindset that enabled you to? Was there this singular event, or what enabled you to say, right, I'm going to let go?
Part of it started a long time ago. I think the first time it really became important in my life to manage my time and leverage whatever I could of my own talents was as my kids were growing up. I made a focused commitment to spend time with them. So I was not a guy, who went to work in the morning and came home late at night and never saw the kids, and and my wife just took care of them, and that was that. I went to soccer practices. I went to every game. I used to brag that I was a veteran of 200 endurance contests in my life: mile, 2 mile, 5K, 10K marathon. My parents came to 2 of my events, out of 200 events. By the time my kids were 13 or 14, I'd been to 200 of their events. By the way, I felt like crap because I missed the 2 that I did miss. But I coached Little League, I refereed soccer, I did a lot of the stuff. Played. I took my kids boogie boarding. That's to this day, and they're in their late 20s. They will tell you that some of their best memories of our boogie boarding, in the waves in Malibu when they're 6 and 7 years old, and no one else is daring to go out in the water, and we're out there in our boogie boards. So it was all. That comes back to the live awesome part. Like live your life. Like, don't sacrifice time with your family because you're building a business so that you could have a better life with your family, right? And that's what a lot of people do. Like one day in 10 years when this business is successful, then I'll be able to spend time with my family, and they'll resent it. So I got that really early on. I understood that, and so that became the sort of the overriding principle was I'm not going to sacrifice the quality time with my kids to build this business, and I think I can do both, and I could. Then the other part of that was, again, just letting go of this idea that nobody can do the idea that I have as well as I can do it, and therefore I have to be the main driver of everything. Once I realized that there were really smart people out there. By the way, I think the most important job that an entrepreneur can do is hire appropriately.
Yeah.
Like spend as much time and dig as deeply as you can into hiring key people, and it'll make your life hugely easy.
Yeah, if you can, what would be 2 or 3 lessons that you've learned with Primal Kitchen specifically that have enabled that to be, if you will, and I know you were successful in many areas of your life, but allowed that to be such a profound success, so in such a condensed time window, if you will?
Well, one of the things was that I got out of my own way in terms of the product. I mean, I started Mark's Daily Apple 8 years earlier to sell vitamins, to sell my supplements. That was the business that I'd had prior to starting Mark's Daily Apple, and I kept thinking, okay, I'm not seeing the opportunity to sell supplements. But as I was writing more and more about health and diet and eating right and real food, I realized I'm writing more about food, and then here I am selling, high potency multivitamins on the side that they don't really go hand in hand. And yes, I've got a decent business, but really, if I'm writing about food, I should be making food. I should be making the sorts of products that I complain about all the time. I used to write all the time about big food and how they're screwing it up and all the additives and how come no one's built, making a great salad dressing or a great mayonnaise. And that was my own getting out of my way in 2014. Excuse me. I'm like, dang. I mean, I missed it. Now, timing is huge in business, and I might have been too early if I'd done it 3 or 4 years earlier, right? So I think the timing was perfect on this. And but that I learned another lesson about, being, yes, you can persevere in a particular business, but don't be blinded by thinking that your perseverance is solving the problem. Sometimes you just are blinding yourself to opportunities that are just over the other side of the fence.
To that point, sort of other side of the fence, if you will, it's interesting to me, and what was there a moment, and this may or may not be the case, but I'm just going to ask, because you just had an extremely successful exit, but after it didn't occur to me a hugely long runway in terms of that exit.
Less than 4 years.
Some entrepreneurs would say, "Oh no, I'm not going to sell, and I'm going to keep." Like, I have no idea, but I'm not a huge Snapchat person, right? But I imagine Snapchat, if it had sold 2 years ago, would have probably been more valuable than it is today. And that's just based on Instagram. I haven't done any research, but whereas Instagram, if that of course they were built through Facebook, but like if they had the kind of users they would sell for more money, right? So what was there? What I'm getting to here is there seems to be more factors in your life. Obviously, it sounded like it was a very good deal still, but what was it that said, okay, this is the right opportunity where I'm going to sell, but I'm going to stay involved? But what was that?
Part of it was I'd always intended to sell the company, so
yes,
I wasn't.
You built it to sell.
I built it to sell. I didn't. I was quite clear with my kids. I offered them the opportunity early on. Do you want me to build this for you and become the legacy? Nope, we're going to do our own thing.
Yep.
That's great. I was approaching 65. Not that has anything to do with anything other than the downsides of the business. The HR stuff, the operation stuff, the personal guarantee on $15 million worth of loans. I mean, some of that stuff starts to weigh heavily. And as you, in food, the more you go down that road, the more expensive it is that you just your margins start to erode because now you're in Costco. You're in all these stores where you don't have the same margins that you have in the early days. You get slotting fees. You got all these other things that factor in. Now you've got inventory that in the old days was $20,000. Now it's $8 million worth of inventory, and it all adds up to like the timing of it was such that I could have gone another 2 years, exited for more money, but I didn't know the political environment, the whole Trump thing, and a lot of our stuff is overseas. I didn't know what the tariffs are going to be like, and so I just said, we're at a great point. I found a great partner. in Kraft Heinz. They were like, those guys are amazing, and they've had their issues in the in their other brands recently. They've had some write downs and some things, but as a company, I really value the relationship. They've given us way more support than I ever anticipated, and they've left us they've left us alone to be autonomous. So it's been an amazing relationship. So I stay on for another 2 years. I'm a consultant. I'm the face of the brand. I'm doing R&D. I'm trying out new products. It's all fabulous.
Yeah.
So it all worked out great. Yeah, I could have stayed, but the timing at some point, you have to say, like with Snapchat or with some of these other companies, it's stay a little bit too long.
Yeah.
And maybe I don't think the marketplace is going to change. I think there's always going to be a market for our ingredients or our foods. There you go. But I just wanted to, and I want this to be $1 billion company.
Yeah.
So I want us to do $1 billion in sales. And there was a point at which, how much is enough for me?
Yeah.
And I'd rather see it grow to be the largest, preeminent, good for you food company in the world. And I wasn't going to be able to do that on my own. I was going to have to find a partner at some point. The timing of this was just right.
Love it. Last couple questions. My hope is that actually that has in playing with giants, if you will, that your focus on quality ingredients will be a marker for the industry, and that hopefully a lot more of these very large, high distribution companies, start to apply some of these quality ingredients.
They have no choice.
Yeah,
they have no choice. It'll happen.
Yeah, God, I hope so. Okay, last couple of questions. So, what as it occurs to me you've been really good at pivoting and subtle reinvention.
Mm-hmm.
What, say 2-3 years from now, and you may still be involved with Primal Kitchen, but what's next for Mark Sisson?
So I've got a very exciting project I'm working on right now that I can't talk about.
Okay.
Because it hasn't happened yet. But when it happens, man, will you hear about it? I'll be blasting it all over the place. But so I'm very excited about the next thing. I'm not going to fade into the background and play golf and do all those things. I have to be involved in something, and it has to be in a field that has world-changing capability.
I love it.
So I was able to do that. I'll give you an example. I mean, I wanted to change the way the world eats, and
yes,
that was the blog, the books, certainly the food company. I'm a investor in a company called Chili Pad. They make a product that cools your sleeping surface down, and it's life-changing. It's transformative. I want to help them change the way the world sleeps.
Yes.
And so I'm taking all of these behaviors that I talk about in the Primal Blueprint, and I'm finding businesses that are aligned with changing the habits of people for the better.
Fantastic. Well, I want to actually just take a moment to honor you for that, because I feel like you have demonstrated a consistency. I mean, you've been writing your blog for, 11 years now, something like
13.
that? 13 years?
2006.
13 years, every day. You've been a voice in a space that obviously now is sort of, at least from my point of view, seems to be emerging even wider. But you were early and often, shall we say, and consistent and still show up consistently. But what also strikes me is I love the fact that you lead with family as like your core, is the core of who you are. Like the fact that like my dad showed up to my games and had my back in that way is part of why he's left such an indelible impression on me, as I mentioned earlier with his dementia and me wanting to be there for him. But I just know my mom and dad being there for me, it's such a testament to you that you've created on a prolific level, but you've done so also with family, in the front view. Yeah. So I want to honor you for that. Where can people find you? What's the best way?
Well, marksdailyapple.com is the blog. Still, I think a fairly interesting article every day. The book, The Keto Reset Diet, is my most recent book. I have one coming out in the fall called Keto Longevity. Yeah. Let's see, Mark Sisson Primal is my Instagram handle, and I put some of the more personal stuff up there.
Yeah. I found it's great.
Primalkitchen.com. Find out about all the food and the great sauces, dressings, and toppings that we make.
Yeah, I've got, like I said, I've probably almost had your whole portfolio in my kitchen.
Yeah.
It's definitely serving me well. Last question. What do you hope, like, so business success, professional achievement, um, you know, I don't want to make it extraordinarily personal, but how do you hope to be remembered? Like in the minds of your kids,
Yeah.
in the minds of those who know you best. What do you hope that the Mark Sisson legacy is? And I don't mean in a grandiose, egoic way, but like, what do you hold closest as your value?
Well, I mean,
Or
I
values?
just want to be remembered as a great dad and husband. I mean, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
I on a grandiose scale, I would like to feel like I had a contribution in shifting the mindset around health and fitness at a time when we were headed down a slippery slope.
Yes.
And there are some of us, Chris Bresser and Rob Wolf and myself that, really seminal in this paleo world, but in a larger scheme, the ancestral health movement and understanding how the body works and being able to give power back to the individual over their health and not relinquish it to the medical machine.
Here's to that, man. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. I really appreciate it, Mark.
My pleasure.
Thanks, man. All right. That felt good.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for taking the time. Hope you didn't mind going into the entrepreneurial stuff, but I was like,
That's probably my new. That's the most interesting discussion for most people now because I've been talking about the other stuff for so long.
Yeah, I was just like, you know what? Like, I've listened to a lot of your. Obviously, I've done pretty deep dive into your work, and it's meant a huge amount to me. But I was like, really love to like get into because I'm sure certain people have. I just hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
Asked you about the entrepreneurial side,
Yeah.
but I'm fascinated by it. I mean, because like not that many people have done or can do what you have done.
Yeah.
And I think it's to me. There's obviously how you do anything is how you do everything. So there's probably a clear corollary between your mindset around health and nutrition and business. So I'm like, okay, I'd love to get into
Well,
it.
but no, and you asked that question, which is you posed it in a way that no one's ever asked it before. But it's really interesting. Is there that common theme really does come down to 80-20. Like I just do the 20% of the stuff that gets me 80% of the results. And whether that was training or whether that was in school, studying, or whether it was, not spending time with my kids, all of those different areas and leveraging the talents and not because I find a lot of people, who work 70 hours or 80 hours a week or 90 hours a week, don't. They just spend time there dicking around, and I'm like, and that's. For me, one of the things that I realized early on when we have a virtual company. So I've got a place up in Oxnard. We have like 20 warehouse people and then maybe 12 support staff and customer service and accounting up there. But the other 50 employees in the company are just working out of their houses in the country.
Really?
Yeah, they're virtual employees. And so people make $175,000 a year, and 150, and 120, and and they're on their own. And I don't. They could be just sitting around in their underwear watching porn, and I wouldn't know. But I'm okay as long as they get their work done. I'm fine with it. So that was another thing that I had to give up was this attachment, like come to the office and give me 8 hours, kind of thing.
That actually was liberating that you shared that because I still have that old paradigm mentality of like I think that's an area where I can break through where it's like. I don't know if it's a control thing, but like office, show up, New
that's
York.
part of the what can I get away with when I talk about work. People, what's the least amount of work I can get away with? So we still have reviews every 6 months, and if you don't do your work, you're gone.
You're gone, yeah.
But I also know that for myself, if I'm working 8 hours, I'm getting 2 hours worth of work done.
Yeah.
No matter where I am. So as long as you give me a good 2 hours of productivity in a day, and especially if you're creative and because you're thinking about that shit in your sleep anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm fine paying you for 8,
Yeah. Well, I can say I spoke. We said hello, but you were besieged by a few folks that was Paleo Effects. I talked to I can't recall her name, the woman I think who runs your marketing. She's here in LA. because I told her I do a bunch of events, and she was like, "Oh, amazing! Like, let's do something, this and that." But she waxed prophetic about working for you and working with you and the company, and she just said it was.
So was she Brittany? Was she?
She was. I forgive me because I don't know.
Okay.
She was a younger, attractive lady. I believe she lives in Los Angeles. I think she's on the marketing team.
Okay.
And she was at the booth.
Yeah.
I don't think it wasn't Expo West. I think it was Paleo FX.
Okay.
And you had that lovely booth, and you were busy, so I just wanted to chat with her, and she was great. And it's always good when you talk to someone who's on the team and is like, oh, I love work, and I think that's a testament to the freedom you give. Actually, it was Marie. I don't know if you know Marie Forleo, but Marie is here sometime, which is not in New York. She's a dear friend. And when I saw her, we went to this Oprah event. I did an event with like Deepak Chopra and Eckhart Tolle invited her, and she invited me to this Oprah event. And I saw her person flew in, and she's like, "My team is like 4 or 5 people. It's not like." But what I know she's been able to do, and she's got a house here, she's got a house in New York, Hamptons, they got a place upstate, they're traveling, she's in Italy right now.
Yeah.
I was like, that's the lifestyle I want. I'd rather have that and be able to go to my kids' games than have to build the next tech company where I'm besieged by stress and cortisol all the time and 100 people, and I've got X number of investors and I've millions of their dollars. I just felt like when I really did a gut check, I still want to build epic, and I want to have an impact in the world on a big scale, but I don't need to have the same 100 employees, all that stress kind of thing.
So what does it look like?
For me, at the moment, it's looking like, so I just started writing a book. I just moved over to New York and got, I'm shopping between 2 book agents. If you have any opinions on that, given how many books you've written, I would be totally open to it. Peak Mind, I'm going to keep doing the podcast, which at the moment through sponsorship is doing well, and keep growing it.
How many downloads do you have?
It's 2. I actually don't even know yet. Okay. It's not even 4. It's not even 4 months old yet.
Okay.
But I've got my list. So I've got about 40,000 person list, which is modest, but just started. So what I do is generally partnerships. So Global Citizen, we grew from nothing to we had over 10 million people on the list in 3 years. So my vision is what I want to do next year. I haven't really shared this, but the vision I'm playing with right now is actually doing a large-scale campaign around Earth Day. So I want to do the largest meditation in the world online, and have people opt in, and then I'll look to get philanthropists that will plant trees for every person that meditates. And so the vision with that is just more. That's actually just more to my passion, because I think we can do all these things around our health, but frankly, if you go outside, you can't fucking breathe because then we're all screwed. So, but I don't want it to be political. I don't want everyone get behind planting trees. Everyone get behind taking some time out to meditate. But the vision with that is I think that'll be frankly a large scale list building exercise as well, because I can get a lot of the high end influencers to support.
Right. So you know Gunnar Lovelace?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do.
So he's doing his good money thing, and I think that's a interesting concept. But also, so that's just what came to mind, and then Elliot, who BizNow,
Summit.
That's sort of up their alley as well.
Yeah.
So what I didn't tell you was I'm trying to buy Vibram, the
amazing
5-finger.
Yeah.
So I probably won't wind up buying. The company is a huge company. I won't buy the company, but I'm trying to get the rights to the 5-finger shoes.
Heck yeah.
And I think it could be really good. I'm wearing these. I wore these last night. They're leather.
Do you? I haven't gotten any yet. Do you recommend? I mean, obviously you do. You're buying the company. I mean, do you wear them all the day, every day? Like, is it your daily shoe?
I've worn them. I've worn them exclusively for 12 years.
Wow.
Just in the last year, I started wearing sneakers because I broke my foot playing frisbee, and I couldn't walk. I couldn't bend my metatarsal. So these are so pliable that I had to be careful about wearing these walking around Miami on the pavement. So I started wearing sneakers for that. But I've pretty much worn these exclusively for 12 years, and I'm 100% behind the concept of these are absolutely, number one, they're comfortable.
Yes.
It's almost like the Primal Kitchen products. Number one, they have to taste
good. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, you're stuck.
And then number two, the ingredients have to pass muster, but you can't start with the ingredients.
Right.
A lot of companies have done that. The product tastes like shit, and then they fail.
Right.
So number one, they have to be comfortable. Number two, they have to be good for you. And I think what I'm trying to do, like, I don't think I will have a problem getting men to wear black leather ones. I've worn 3-piece suits with this, gone on stage, gone to weddings and funerals. You couldn't tell I had these kind of shoes on.
Yeah, no, I didn't even notice.
Yeah. But what I'm looking at is getting women who are wearing Lulus, walking around town, shopping, whatever, to be wearing these instead of heels or instead of pumps. and giving their feet a rest. So I want them to feel very comfortable wearing them. I want them to be comfortable. I want them to feel comfortable in terms of fashion statement, because right now these guys have done a horrible job of design and fashion. They're neon colors, they're rubberized. You know, you see some 240-pound guy at the gym with frickin' neon ballet slippers on. By the way, Kyle Kingsbury wears them.
Yeah, I know. I've seen him wear them a bunch of times.
He's like my number one guy. I'm going to go to him as soon as I do this deal, if I can do this deal. I didn't want to talk about it because I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, of course.
Term sheet into them right now, but I want to change the way the world walks.
Yeah, I love it.
That's my next thing. So,
that is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, the walking thing. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because like that's actually that was one of the hardest things with my dad as he's in his decline, was like we could still go on walks. Like even at the end, like we'd go to the park and back, but like when it got to the point where he had to like sit, he can't do it anymore. Yeah. But walking in that, even in that was something they could still do.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing with my mom too. I try to get her, to at least walk. But yeah, it's I don't know why it's so basic and so simple, but people just resist it.
Yeah. They're so well, now we've got a couple of generations of non-walkers.
Yeah.
Cars and reluctant to go outside in the cold or in the urban environment or whatever. So your dad is still alive.
He's still alive. He's pretty far along at this point. The good news is, dementia, Alzheimer's he doesn't have Alzheimer's. He has frontal lobe Lewy body, but a lot of times it brings out nasty sides of people.
Yeah.
My dad, I'm obviously I'm biased, but he's one of the kindest men you've ever met in your life.
Yeah.
Just like a man of integrity, salt to the earth.
Yeah.
Just like and he still is. What's crazy is he's lost his like I can't have a conversation, but he still recognizes me, still smiles when he sees me. But with kids, animals, like the last things that would go, he'd still be like, "Great work." He'd say to a dad, like, I remember we watched Star Wars, and he'd get up, and he doesn't have the faculties now to speak full sentences, but like he saw this, he'd see. You talked about family. This guy, his father with his son at the movie, and he's basically like, "Great work," And so like it's funny, like these small little things to me would mean the world. But he's pretty. He's pretty far along. Luckily, he's still at home. My parents are still together. They've been married almost 50 years. So my mom's still there for him, which says a lot about her. But
it must be really tough for her, though.
Oh, it's super tough.
Jesus.
Yeah, he's a veteran, so we have someone come in now in the mornings, and then he has a day